So, good day. I'm going to start talking, so just to see, for those of you that may be out there already, for those of you who have not, there's a comment part on the page that you can link to, and just to let me know if you're out there. That's useful to help. I'm just going to give it a few minutes before people join on. So just to let you know, I'm here. There's usually about a 15 sort of second bit of a delay on where I'm at and where you are. So let's just wait a few more seconds and see. So if you can let me know if you're out there, that does help. If not, I'm just going to start broadcasting, but we'll just wait for a moment. Thank you. So Lizette has joined, Riet has joined. So good to see you there. So yeah, I'll just keep populating as you come on. Valerie, hi Valerie, Elizabeth. Okay, nice. Lots of people are starting to come through already. That's fantastic. Thank you for that. But we will just wait a little while, because I know it can be a bit of a challenge for people to go through this process and to just get going. So just be patient, those that are here already. Perhaps put your mind to seeing if you can read some of the titles behind me. Norman, good to see you. I hope you're well, Norman. So just keep adding on to that list. It helps to see who's here. And as I say, we'll just give it a few more minutes. A number of people have reached out to me and said, yeah, they really value this idea. They can't join us at the moment, so they'll watch this later on. So I'm just going to give it a few more minutes, so let's just be patient. Oh, there's other people now acknowledging. Okay. All right, so let's kick off. I just want to welcome everyone. I also want to welcome people from around the world, because I know there are a number of people that will listen into this and are listening from all across the world. I've got family in Australia. My son's in Australia. He's listening. I know that my stepson in a little place called Nelson, just outside Vancouver, and his girlfriend, they're going to tune in. Juliet, she's in London, she's tuning in. My brothers, one of whom is in Hermanus, the other one's here. They're also going to connect. And I've got friends in the States and all over the show. So this is an endeavor just to reach out to everyone, and to acknowledge that we are really living in unprecedented times for all of us. This is a historic, challenging time. And we've witnessed all sorts of different human beings showing up in this time. We've seen it on the news feeds, we've seen it in social media, we've seen different kinds of humanity showing up in this period of time. So what I'm doing here, and what I'd like to do, and I'll get more into it over the course of the next hour or so, is I'd like to offer up my little part to this. Okay, it's just my small part. And really it begins by sharing with you my discoveries, and discoveries that I've put together in this book called The Genius Program. I'm going to talk to it more in detail in a moment. But what I really want to talk about is why it's important for us to all know that in this difficult period of time, in these difficult times, at any difficult time, we all have access to very deep and very intuitive inner resources. And those inner resources are with us all the time, okay? So many people are unaware of that. Many people are challenged in terms of accessing those resources, how to get to them. But every single human being is blessed, is gifted with really deep resource that's available to them, okay? So at this point in time, whether you're just trying to regulate your emotions, okay, because we're all going through this swings of ups and downs regarding what we're feeling and experiencing with this COVID-19 experience. You know, whether it's the deep worry, the anxiety, the fears that reside in us, those moments of breakthrough when we feel exhilarated or relieved, and then we go back again. How are we regulating these emotions becomes important. So it may be a case that right now you're deeply concerned about your career, your business going forward. How do you go about redesigning that business or career? Or it may be that you're asking, you know, some of those bigger, deeper questions about how does this all end? Where does this end for us? Whatever it is that you're asking, whatever it is that you're deeply curious about or challenged by, you need to know that the answers actually already sit within you. They sit deeply within you. But accessing them is often a challenge, and that's really what the Genius program is all about. So let's look at that program, all right? And what I'm going to talk about today is just an outline of it. Over the next few weeks when we get together, I'm going to expand on the program. But what I want to first start about is sharing with you there are 5 areas that I'm going to cover today. The first is what the insights to intelligence is. What is Genius? What is it about? I'm going to talk about the 3 parts to this program and the tools of the program and what that journey is. I'm going to tell you that there is an online version of this book if you would like to access that. Those that are interested that might want to look at group or individual coaching, we can talk about that, but offline. And that if you have any questions or any challenges, just please make notes of these as we go through, and you can email me those with any questions that you may have. So let's go to the beginning. Let's go to the big question that many people have around this, and that is, well, what is Genius? Okay, here I am talking about the Genius program, and many people like to ask that question, what is Genius? And Genius essentially is when we access our whole intelligence. Okay, so what is whole intelligence? And a number of years ago, as I ventured into a career where I started working more and more with people in the space of learning and development, and I started reading up on the subject of our intelligences, I discovered a profound piece of work by a gentleman called Howard Gardner. And Howard Gardner was a professor at Harvard University. And Howard Gardner was a champion in terms of defining and expanding on and explaining to us the wholeness of our intelligence. So intelligence is multiple, comes in all sorts of different shapes and forms. It covers all the functionalities that we experience, language, touch, taste, creativity, all sorts of things. And what Howard Gardner did in his work is expand on that and define that. And his definition can be brought down into essentially 4 very clearly defined areas of intelligence, but intelligence is broad and it's interactive. So we're using these all the time. Although we can break it down into 4 areas, it is interactive, and it feeds one on the other. But the 4 areas of intelligence are: there is analytical intelligence, and analytical intelligence speaks to the goals that we set, the objectives that we look towards creating for ourselves. Then there is performance intelligence, and performance intelligence speaks to, well, how are we doing? How are we monitoring our progress regarding these, and what are the results? What are the outcomes about that sort of stuff? Then the third area of intelligence is creative intelligence, and creative intelligence really speaks to and addresses our vision for things, okay, our access to something called imagination, and how frequently we can use that. And then the fourth area of intelligence is emotional intelligence, and emotional intelligence speaks to our relationship with humanity. So in other words, who we are and how we interact with the rest of humanity. So these 4 intelligences, analytical, performance, creative, and emotional, is what makes up our whole intelligence. And our whole intelligence informs and builds who we are. Now, I got curious about this when Howard Gardner published a piece of work called the Project Zero. And in Project Zero, Howard Gardner and his team had done a number of pieces of research regarding how early children in early learning adapt learning. So he went into the field and he researched, and they did a lot of research with 4-year-olds, because 4 is the universal age when kids start attending schools and education in a formal way. So his research was very, very insightful and quite revealing. And they tested these 4-year-olds across this multiplicity of intelligence. So they tested them around feeling, language, symbols, mathematics, models, all sorts of different ranges of stuff, all sorts of very intricate tests, but for 4-year-olds. And their research was astonishing. What they discovered is that a 98.8% of the children that they tested, and it was a large group, it was something like 2,000 kids, what they noticed was that all of these children demonstrated genius intelligence. Yet we also know that in society at large, broadly speaking, anywhere you go in society, between 2 and 3% of the population demonstrate genius intelligence. So the immediate results of this first inquiry of Project Zero was that actually we're all born with genius. We're all born with this whole intelligence, and kids use all their intelligence. But then the obvious question emerged from the research, well, if at the age of 21 and 23, only 2 and 3% of the population are actually using this stuff, where on earth does our intelligence go? And this is what Project Zero really revealed, and this is what they dug deeply into. And what they started to present was that our intelligences get, in their terminology, they are covered over. And the reason for that is that for 17 years of our adolescent, our learning, early learning and development, we are introduced to an education system. So this applies to most people under the age of probably about, or at least over the age of probably about 30, down to even 25, okay? But there's a large group of emerging people under the age of 25 where this no longer really applies. So let's go back to that group, let's say over the age of 25, you will have experienced what is essentially an industrial age educational model. And that industrial educational model was invented to meet the needs of that time and that period, where we needed regular, consistent, and common, universal, uniform education that enabled a workforce to compete and be useful and valuable in that environment. So systematic and universal education models were created around the world, and it met the need of that time very successfully. So we learned all these wonderful subjects, you know, language, mathematics, geographies, all of those great subjects we upheld, and we learned this beautiful stuff. The problem is not so much in the content, but in the fact that during that 17 years of adoption and buying into this stuff, what happened is that from a consistency perspective, in other words, the daily rigor and the daily ritual of your learning was linear. In other words, you did one thing, followed by another thing, followed by another thing. And that process is called linearity. Okay, so whilst the subjects we learn are immensely valuable, the manner in which we adopted them was very linear. And that linearity emphasizes and designs a particular way that the brain functions. So patterns and patterns and patterns over 17 years of early learning taught us to be very linear in our thinking. Okay, so we were continually bombarded by stuff like questions and answers, and questions that demanded singular answers. Okay, and our rituals were all uniform, and the way we sat was uniform, and we wore uniforms. And what it did is it promoted and it emphasized two of those four intelligences. It promoted the analytical and the performance intelligences. It really made them function very, very well. So for most of us, and I'm always generalistic in this, but for most of us that experience that early adolescent typical industrial education model, what happened is we came out at the end of the system with very high performing analytical and performance intelligence, most of us. So what happens as well is that the balance of our intelligence, the creative and the emotional intelligence, was underutilized. And that underutilization, that inability to consistently use those intelligences, is what leads to the fact that a vast majority of people are not using the whole intelligence in society. They are, in fact, not accessing their genius. So this was what his research revealed. So let me demonstrate this in another way. If I said to you that for the next 6 months, I'm not going to use my left arm. Okay, I'm going to stop using my left arm. I'll put it by my side here, and I won't use it any longer. Over that period of time, you know what's going to happen to that arm. What's going to happen is slowly it will lose muscle function and tone. The limb itself will slowly shrink almost and wither, and with it, it'll become increasingly harder for me to do anything with it. Okay, then if after 6 months I elect to suddenly start using that arm, I think you also can relate to this and know that if I was to suddenly start doing that, then I'm going to experience a lot of pain, a lot of uncomfortableness in using that arm. However, if I am consistent in the reuse of that arm, and if I stay with it, if I work it consistently, then we also know that if I go through that pain of re-engaging, I'll have full functionality of that arm again. So the same thing applies to our intelligences. If we, for 17 years of our early adolescence, are only using 2 aspects of our intelligence, then it's very, very difficult to just suddenly start using the creative and the emotional components of that. So this is what genius intelligence is about. This is why we are unable to intuitively access it a lot of the time, that it can become very uncomfortable for us. And this is why for many of us, and not everyone, but for many of us, when we are confronted with really epic, life-changing circumstances, it can be very difficult to find the formula and find the solution to these things. And we get stuck in waiting for some miracle from the outside to appear that's going to help us and resolve everything. And that's why I say that the actual inside, the inner resources that we have allow us to access this stuff. So it's about acknowledging that you actually have the intuitiveness within you, and that you can call on that intuitiveness. It's already there. It's just not being used. So I've been very generalistic about this. What we also know, and you've experienced this, we all experience this, is that from time to time we do flutter in and out of our creative and our emotional intelligences. That's quite normal. But it's about being able to access them consistently. And that's really what this Genius Program book is about. That's what this journey is about. So let me talk about the book now in terms of what it is as a structure. It's a 3-part structure. And the first part of the structure is about discovering. And that discovery is about discovering, well, what are the current thinking habits that exist that prevent me from accessing my creative and emotional intelligences? Because we are habit, okay? Everything that we do is habit. It's habit in both the good, the indifferent, and the negative way. But what we do is we discover how to do something, and we follow that, and we keep doing that on a routine basis. So our habits determine our behavior, and our behavior is who we are. So we call on habit all the time, but we're unconscious to calling on habit all the time. So we have a set of good habits, we have a set of indifferent habits, and we have a set of pretty bad habits, most of us, okay? So the first part of the book is about discovering, well, where is my thinking habits? Where do they sit? How am I continually going to this stuff? And how can I notice that in order to change it and liberate and free myself from the thinking habit that I currently have? So the first part of the book delves into that. We're going to come back to that more in a minute. The second part of the book opens with a little area of what I call contextual setting, and that's about understanding that within a context there is content, okay? And very often we can get those two things completely muddled up, and it confuses us. That's important to understand because it leads to the second part of the book, which is what I call the liberating tools. These are the tools that if you practice them consistently, and this is the stuff you really want to know, these are the tools that if you practice them consistently, start to liberate the creative and the emotional aspects of your intelligence, okay? Again, we're going to talk about this more. And then the third part of the book, which is linked and is also very, very important, speaks to the neuroscience of changed behavior, okay? Now, we all want to be able to just press a button and show up as a better version of who we are. We also all know that that doesn't work like that. And we also have this terrifying realization that, oh my goodness me, I've got to do some work if I want a different outcome, okay? We know that. Okay, we're not fools, we all know that. Neuroscience knows that if you adopt a new habit, it takes about 21 days for that habit to be formatted and to become a part of your consistent, deeper habit. It forms what's known as a neural pathway, and once the neural pathway is established, going to that habit is intuitive. It's easy. You just become it. So the third part of the book are a series of exercises. There are 8 exercises in total. And what I do in that section of the book is I say, these are the exercises that you need to practice on a daily basis in order for you to leverage those new liberating concepts. So there it is. Let me just go back over this again. First part of the book, which we're going to talk a bit about today, first part of the book is about discovery. And it's about discovering your habit thinking at this point in time. Because it's your habit thinking at this point in time that is causing you to be who you are. So, okay, what does that mean, right? So, how you are showing up is you. And how you are showing up on a regular basis is determined by what you've been doing over the past few days, few weeks, few months, few years, okay? So, you, as you are today, you're not an accident. You are the product of your previous behavior, which is a product of your previous habits. So, if you want a different outcome, if you want to be able to reinvent yourself for a post-COVID-19 world, if you want to reshape how you are managing your emotional responses to everything, if you want to start answering the bigger questions of your life, the purpose of it, where you're going, you've got to have a serious review of what's causing you to keep showing up in the way that you are. Otherwise, you're just going to keep repeating what you were yesterday. So it's important to recognize this very vital step. You are a product of your habit. You're a product of your behavior. And that begins as a thought, begins as an idea. Then it becomes an action. So every action you take starts as a thought. Where's that coming from? Where's that thought coming from? So first part of the book, the part we're going to talk about more today, and I'm going to give you some tools and exercises today that you're going to take with you into the week. But the first part of this book is about discovering what are my current thinking habits. Because if I get clarity around that, then I know who I am, then I can determine which of those I'm going to shape, which of those I'm going to let go of, which of those I'm going to strengthen and support. Okay. Second part of the book is about liberating ideas. Okay. And there's some really obvious and very clear ideas that you already know, some of which you practice, but many of which you don't use consistently enough. Those are liberating tools. Those are the tools that change and inspire our thinking. Then there are also, other tools that sit amongst here that can be deep dives and hard work, stuff that you've got to really examine in terms of stuff that you may need to let go of. The third part of the book, right, is that embedding. How do I make this an embedded experience? How do I ensure that the stuff I learn, the stuff I'm choosing to let go of, the stuff I'm gathering, the new thinking that I want becomes the consistent and the default setting? And the only way you're going to do that is by recognizing how neuroscience works, and that is small, gentle, easy steps, little bits at a time, but little bits consistently. So little daily routines that shape and embed and create the new neural pathways that cause you to intuitively show up as a better version. So there you go, 3 parts. That's 4 parts. 3 parts, right? What's going on currently with my thinking? What are my liberating tools that I can use to get a different experience in? And then how do I make these concrete in my life? How do these become who I am? Okay. So if you've got any questions that are sitting, you can access that by just jotting down on the side of the Facebook page. You can just throw those out there if you want to. If not, just keep a piece of paper handy if you've got one, and just keep writing stuff down so that you're gathering this stuff. Just give you a pause there to maybe take in some of the things that I'm sharing. So let's go back now to that starting point in terms of this first part of the program. What are these habits of thinking that I have that are determining how I'm showing up all the time? In his work on Project Zero, Howard Gardner and his team made reference to something that I thought was really terrific. He called them voices of judgment. And I use that in my work as well. We talk about these voices of judgment. And let me give you an example of this. You may not know, you have to become conscious to it, but inside everyone there is a narrative. There's a story going on. Okay? So, and it's happening in every single microsecond of your life. You've just tuned out of it because it's habit. But the narrative that's going on is that little narrative, that little voice that's saying, okay, Graham, it's a good idea to do this. Let's go ahead and do that. Or the same little voice that says, no, Graham, whoa, stop doing that. And you've already had one of those slices of carrot cake. 2 is too many, okay? And then that same little voice that you'll often experience that maybe intervenes again on top of that voice and says, no, actually, Graham, that's okay. You can have another slice because you didn't have one yesterday. The justification of that. So that narrative that's going on, there's a story going on, okay? So just stay with this for a minute. That story is coming from a whole history of who you are. And that whole history of who you are began with some early narrative. And that narrative likely came from your parents, your siblings, and then as you emerge out of that household environment, okay, out of the comfort of that, schoolmates, okay, and then broader, maybe people in society, and then as you start stretching further and further out of the environment of home, then it becomes people like teachers, societal influencers, groups, leaders in those groups, bosses, whoever, okay? So along the way, along your story, you have bought into all sorts of voices. You've purchased them. You've said, "Oh, I'm gonna listen to that one." Okay, that's a valuable voice. I'm gonna carry on listening to him or her, because they've served you positively. But many of these voices reach a point where they don't serve you any further yet. But because they are habits, we continue to use them. So we might continue to use the voice of my father long after the voice of my father serves me. But because it's a habit, because it's deeply ingrained, okay, when I hear that historic reference of Graham, pursuing a career in advertising is of going to be no value to you whatsoever. Rather stay with being an engineer, okay? That voice that disrupted me, that led me away from what I was choosing to do. I now realize that didn't work for me. Okay, that voice doesn't work for me. So why should I continue to use that any further? Each one of us has a string of voices and narrative that are influencing our thinking at present. And that very much is the starting point for you. So just make a little note to yourselves now. Who are those voices that I am still listening to? The positive ones, fantastic. That's beautiful. If you've got positive voices motivating, inspiring you, encouraging you, that's brilliant. That's lovely. That's a healthy, motivating voice. But you may well have voices that come from this historic narrative that are disempowering you and causing you to hesitate and causing you to not actually move forward. So this is the first component within this spectrum of deep discovery. So make a note to yourself about that. Let's now look to a further component of this deep dive and the tools that will be useful to you, another tool that will be useful to you. And the next part of that is something that I call frames, all right? So just stay with me a second. I'm just going to get a piece of paper to help illustrate this. A frame, think of a picture frame, okay? But a frame is a state of mind, okay? If I take a piece of paper and I fold this down the middle, and then I fold it again, okay, into two parts, okay, like that. Folded it twice, okay. Then what I do is I'm going to tear a little corner away, tear out this little corner in the top, right? Then I'm going to open that piece of paper, okay. And I've got a little window. I'm going to look through that little window. You see me there, right? Okay. So what's interesting about that? That's a frame. All right. And if you do this as an exercise and you bring the frame closer to your eye or further away from your eye, okay, the further the frame goes away from you, the less of the environment around you you will see. Okay. So when I do this with groups of people, I ask everyone to do it, and everyone sits there and they have a little bit of fun. And I sort of hold it up to your face, take it away, move it in and out. Okay. And what people reveal, what it reveals to them is that if you look through that little frame, okay, at any point in time you look around you, what can happen is that you will only see 2 or 3 people at once. If you move the piece of paper away, you see everyone. Okay, that's a frame. Okay, so we have all sorts of frames that determine our thinking. So one of the obvious ones is gender. Okay, so if you're born male, you're likely to come and experience, and pretty obviously, you're going to experience life from a male framework. You're going to look at life through that lens that says, oh, the world out there is male. Okay? It's intuitive, it's who you are, but it isn't all of who you are. So knowing your frames across different components helps you further to understand, well, what kind of thinking is governing my behavior, okay? So, but frames go deeper than that. Frames go to things like language, economics, age, okay? Status, education, a whole range of things are governed by frames. So if you look at the subject of frames and you say to yourself, well, within the framework of, let me say, economics, is my thinking governed by my view of economics alone? Or am I able to see the subject of economics from a framework of a 19-year-old teenager that lives in Alexandra Township? You know, am I able to see that? Okay. Because if I'm able to disassociate or disengage with my own fixed frame and widen my view, okay, then I start to tap into that broader thing. And this is about, remember, this is about recognizing the thinking that is limiting you. All the way through this first thing, these are the thoughts that limit you. So in the case of the voices, it's what voices have I got going on that are limiting me or holding me? What frames do I have going on that hold me or limit me? So I might have a particular frame around spiritual belief. Okay, is that holding me up? Okay, I might have a particular framework around education. Is the fact that I only have a matric certificate holding me up? Okay, whatever your frame is, start to recognize where those frames are coming from. Okay. So now let's look to, I'm not going to cover all of these today, we're going to pick this up in a future place, but let's look to another big frame, and it's huge, it's influencing many of us at the moment, and it's called fear. Okay, because fear is essentially a frame, but fear alone is also one of those things that we can attach ourselves to deeply, 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 and it's a limiting, it holds us up, prevents us from really accessing what we can be. So fear is only something that exists in a future state. It doesn't exist in the present moment. And it's important here to distinguish between the physicalness of danger, which is something that could happen to me immediately, or fear. Fear and danger are separate things. Fear is something that we manufacture in our minds, okay? And fear is a very, very deep-set, powerful driver of who we are. It can be motivating, but it can also prevent us from doing things. It can close us down. So, coming back to the core of this first part of the program, which is about discovering my thinking. What are my thinking habits that are holding me up? Fear is one of them. So how do you manage this? How do you navigate your way out of this? So how you're going to navigate your way out of this is by starting to make a note, consistently make a note of those moments when fear becomes present in your life. Okay, so I'm going to talk about this in a moment as we sort of wind up the session by saying, right, what are the actions you can take going forward? And one of the things I'm going to ask you to do is start doing notes for the day. Okay, but let's go back to how do you navigate this? If you can contextualize that fear is a created thing, it's a self-created thing. If you can see that, that's the starting point. That's the bit that's going to start you overcoming fear. Okay, and one of the profound ways to do that is to actually, if that idea is living in your head, is to take that idea out of your head and put it on a piece of paper. So write your fear down, and you will find two things happen. First of all, one of the experiences you might have about that is that you find it difficult to write the fear down. And if you find it difficult to write the fear down, it's because it doesn't exist at all. Okay? If, on the other hand, you are able to write that fear down, and then you need to immediately look to, well, then what action can I take? And if you follow that action, and you follow that action immediately, the fear will disappear. Because fear is this thing that sits in front of us. It's an illusionary state. It's an imagined state. We create it. Okay. So what I like to do around fear with groups of people is I like to I like to create a little story, a little scenario story. And it kind of goes a bit like this. It says, you've had a great, weekend. You had a great Sunday. Okay. And that's Monday. Oh, this is back pre-COVID-19, by the way. It's a great Sunday. You've had a good time. Everything's worked out all right. Everything's been fabulous. And then it's Monday morning and you're off to do your work. And you show up and there are your colleagues and you're all having a good chat. Maybe you're having a coffee and just catching up, that little, as I say, pre-COVID, right? But you're having that little chat and you're feeling great. Everything's good because you had a good weekend. You're feeling positive about what's going forward. And you say, well, Monday's good. Suddenly you get a phone call. And the phone call is from the PA to the chief executive. And the PA says to you, hi, Graham, chief executive would like to meet you Thursday morning, wants to have a conversation with you. Before you've got a moment to even ask, what is it about? Why? What's going on here? Okay, they're gone. And in that instant, what happens inside your brain is the following. About 5% of you disengages with Monday and actually becomes Thursday morning. And during the course of Monday, that accelerates. By the end of Monday, that's sitting at around 11, 12%. Consequence of that is on Monday night, you don't sleep particularly well. You wake up Tuesday, a little bit edgy, a little bit irritable. Tuesday becomes increasingly difficult because more and more of you is not in Tuesday, it's now in Thursday. And the consequence of that is you're not really engaged with the people around you. You're not performing at the levels you should be performing at, which is causing increasing further anxiety and stress. Tuesday night, you don't sleep very well at all. You wake up Wednesday morning. Ooh, now things are difficult because you are now snappy, okay? You're finding tasks even harder to sort of manage and confront. All sorts of really uncomfortable things going on for you, and more people that you're battling to engage with. Because now, okay, on Wednesday, there's a great proportion of you that is actually living in Thursday morning. Wow, you don't sleep well on Wednesday night at all. Thursday morning, bang, you wake up, you're outside the CEO's office, sitting, waiting. You're tired. CEO comes out, says to you, morning, Graham, how are you? And says to you, oh, I'd like you to meet Patricia. Patricia is from our overseas branch, okay? And she's come out here to see how we do things. And I couldn't think of anyone better than you, Graham, to take Patricia around and show Patricia how we do what we do here. And, just to guide her through any of the questions she may have. And he stops and he looks at you and he says, why are you so tired, Graham? And I like to tell that story because the story, if you follow that story, is a story that we all have. And that is the story that we see a lot of the negativity in things and we just latch on to the negativity long before the outcome has revealed itself to us. So fear is this awfully invasive and it builds, it gets bigger and bigger. So the sooner we stamp it out, the sooner we develop the habit of getting close to it, recognizing what it is, all it is fear, okay? That's all it is. It's self-created, moving through it, and we move through it by approaching it, asking ourselves, what can I do about this? And then boom, off it goes and we move through, okay? So look to those moments where you're experiencing that fear narrative. All right, so what I've done is I've introduced you to a number of elements to the first part of this deep discovery of the Genius Program. We've talked about the habits of thinking. I've talked about the voices that are there. That's part of that story, is part of the narrative. Okay, I've talked about those frames that you may be operating from, and I've talked about fear to some extent. So let's just recap for the purpose of today, because I'm conscious now of the time as we start to move towards the end of this hour together. I want you to be able to move forward with certain actions and start to consider the process involved if you want to shape and start to alter who you are, because we can. Okay, we can reinvent ourselves if we elect to acknowledge and see the habits of thinking that have brought us to this point at present. And if we're diligent and do the discovery work around which of those are positive, which of those are indifferent, and which of those are holding us up and preventing us from moving forward. If we do that work, if we invest in that work, okay, it's the starting point to discovering a better version of who we are. On discovering those thinking habits, we move into that second part, which we'll talk about next week in more detail, which is about, well, what are these liberating tools? What are these tools I can start to engage in that are going to help me start to free who I am and become that better version, that improved version, that version that allows me to access my creative intelligence, that access my emotional intelligence in a more consistent and a better way. So this is what I'd suggest you do, and it's pretty straightforward, but it comes to commitment, and it comes also to the neuroscience of, well, how does this operating system work? Get yourself a book, and each day try and find the same time to do this each day, because that is also going to reinforce and teach your thinking. It's going to inform your thinking of what needs to happen. And I want you to sit down, okay? And I want you to start examining, start recording your habits of thinking. So you might want to do that in this way. Question: what are the thinking habits that have been governing me today? Where did voices appear? Where did I have fear? Where was I operating from a framework? And what else was going on? And simply start downloading. So it's a form of journaling. Start downloading the thinking and acknowledging and seeing where my thinking is coming from. So start seeing it. And what's important here, again, is the neuroscience of this. If you take it out of here and you put it on something concrete, a piece of paper, okay, then it removes it from that system, so it will stop floating around in that system. But in presenting it on this hard surface, you're going to start to see, and particularly if you do this consistently, you're going to start to see patterns emerge and consistent behaviors emerging. What that enables you to do is to recognize and start to own, oh, I am consistently dwelling on this voice. It was my sister's voice, or it was a voice from my parents, or it's a voice from somebody else. That voice is still very evident in my life. Okay, so it's about being consistent. It's about just being gentle and deliberate with my thinking. What's coming up? What do I need to be conscious of here? What am I seeing that's shaping my thinking at present? Do that consistently, daily, for about 5 minutes a day. Okay, just do it. Okay, just start loading. Don't concern yourself too much at this point in time, how do I fix all of this? Just be conscious to it. The more consistent you are in terms of doing this, the more that's going to start becoming clear to you. So I'm going to wind off by saying to you that if you want to leap ahead, if you want to start exploring, believe you can still access this book as an online version. If you go to Amazon, if you just you Google the Genius Program, Graham Butchart, it should take you to the Amazon version of this book. Okay, so you can get the tablet version of the book if you want it. If you're battling to get that, you can email me, graham@grahambutchart.com, and I'm sure I can find you a virtual copy as well. I can just send that through to you. However you want to do that, it's entirely up to you. I'm doing this because I really want to see if I can help people discover a deeper part of who they are, a remarkable part of who they are. And I wouldn't say this if I didn't know for certain that it exists. And I know that for certain that it exists because I did this work on myself. Okay? There was a point in my life where I was a complete shambles and I was being governed by awful habits of thinking. I'd become a slave to my absence of thinking. I'd become a slave to the unconsciousness of my thinking. And I was manifesting that in my life. That was who I'd become. I'd become miserable. I'd become depressed. I'd become the kind of person that was waiting for the world to solve my problems. Okay? And that's a dead end scenario. It's a no-fix scenario. It's a no-win scenario. Fortunately, I was introduced to a way of thinking that said, I'm in charge of me. It's my responsibility. It's not somebody else's. It's my responsibility. And, oh, by the way, here are the tools. And I gave up waiting for somebody to help me. And I gave up blaming the universe for my moans and my lack of this, and I don't have this, and I don't have that. I gave up all of that stuff. I did as I was asked to do. And before very long, I started realizing, oh my goodness me, this stuff actually works. But it only works if you commit to doing it. So that idea again that, oh, well, an hour with Graham will solve this, that's rubbish. An hour of no one's going to solve it. But an hour consistently with you will solve it if you use the right tools. So I used it. The other thing is that I've been doing this now for a number of years with lots of different people in all sorts of different walks of life, from 11-year-olds to 70-year-olds. And I've witnessed them change their lives. They've all started showing up as better versions of who they are. Okay? And they're yippee, they're grateful, they're happier human beings. It doesn't solve the world's problems. It doesn't change everything dramatically. It just changes things incrementally. But what it changes is your perspective, and it changes your perspective from living in a glass half-empty world to a glass with potential. And you are that potential. Somebody else isn't that potential. You are the potential. You can change your world. You can change your experience of the world, regardless of what's going on, regardless of what happens next. We will venture out of this COVID-19 world. We will be poorer on many respects. From a physical space, we will be poorer from it. But we've got the opportunity to be deeply more powerful as individuals as a consequence from it. We can learn a great deal. We've seen that demonstrated over the past month around the world. We've seen humanity showing up as better versions of who they are. So this is your opportunity. Don't think that you can do this in a light way. You can't do this in a light way. This is about a deep investment. I can show you how to do this, okay? And then it's up to you. So I'm going to show you these tools. So let's just wind up Wind up, fine. Again, I'm a great believer in repetitiveness. The first part of this is doing a deep discovery into the habits of thinking that governing you presently. That's the first part. So start journaling what those habits are. Next week, when we sit together, I'm going to tell you about some of the great liberating tools that can change your thinking instantly. I'm also going to start then telling you about the embedding technique, the technique that is going to cause you to move into those new ways of, those empowering new ways of thinking in a consistent way. So that's about an hour. If you have any questions, please just send them to me via email. This will be available as a recorded online version. So if you didn't get a chance, if you lost a connection, if you were unable to get to it, it should still be on that on that Facebook page. So for the time being, just take 5 or so minutes a day, sit down and start recording those thinking habits that have been governing you to this point in time. Good luck. Be safe. Okay. Social distance. Don't do silly things. All right. And keep looking to the horizon, because the future is a great place. Bye for now. Thank you.